Sparrow by G J Ogden. Narrated by J.S. Arquin. Ramsey Lorcan threw open the door and found himself charging down the barrel of a pulse pistol. The weapon discharged, but Lorcan's momentum had propelled him out of the line of fire and into the body of the gunman, Hector Malloy. The collision sent the two men barreling along the corridor, as if an airlock had ruptured and was blowing them into space. Lorcan clawed at the deck plates of the transport and arrested his fall before Malloy had a chance to shoot again. He used his advantage to land a crushing elbow strike that smashed Malloy's nose, splattering blood over the man's face like an abstract artist tossing paint at a canvas. Malloy fell, clutching his broken nose, and allowing Lorcan to gather up his own weapon, which had cartwheeled down the corridor along with him after the two men had collided. "Where is it, Malloy?" Lorcan yelled, aiming his pulse pistol at the man who was the only known lead to a Malfunct he'd been hunting for the last 10 years. "I know it's on this transport with you, so give it up and you might still live." "Eat shit, asshole," Malloy said, spitting blood onto the deck. "I'm no synth, so you can't do a damn thing to me. Besides, if I tell you anything, then that freak of nature will just come after me next. Not if you tell me where it is," Lorcan snarled. Lorcan hauled Malloy up by his shirt collar and shoved him against the wall, before pressing the barrel of the pistol into the man's broad chest. "I swear to God, if that Malfunct gets away because of you, I'll make you pay." Malloy sprayed a haze of blood-stained spittle into Lorcan's face, then smiled, saliva dribbling over his nose and lips. "Like I said, eat shit," Malloy said. "Unless you're going to pay double what that synth freak gave me, and I know you can't. You can kiss my sweaty asshole." Lorcan gritted his teeth and added pressure to the trigger. The only thing he hated more than malfunctioning synths were the human bloodsuckers that helped them to avoid menders like him. "That thing has killed over 100 people," Lorcan said, digging the barrel of his pistol deeper in Malloy's flesh. "Don't you care?" "No, I don't care," Malloy hit back. "And I'll happily take 2 years in lock for helping that Malfunct, because when they let me out, I'll still be rich." Lorcan fought the urge to blow the man's heart out of his chest. But while he had a license to kill malfunctioning synths, he had no jurisdiction when it came to natural-born humans, even the degenerate ones. If Malloy didn't cooperate, he was back to square one. "Are we done, or are we going to make a deal?" Malloy said, dabbing more blood and snot from his nose. "Here's my offer, dickhead," Lorcan snarled, before whipping the frame of his pulse pistol across the side of Malloy's face. The man's body went limp and landed in a crumpled heap at his feet. Lorcan slid his pistol back into its holster, then stared at Malloy for a few seconds, lamenting the fact that his only solid lead was now drooling on his boots. "God damn it!" Lorcan cursed, shaking his head at the obstinate man. "I was so close." The satisfaction he'd got from decking Malloy had been fleeting, and now he was left with a sense of crushing disappointment. Malloy had been his only link to Malfunct SPR-0, a malfunctioning synthetic human that was better known by its ID code, Sparrow. Sparrow had been responsible for more than 100 brutal murders spanning a period of 10 years. A freak mutation had screwed up the synth's artificial DNA, giving it the ability to metamorphose into a new body after each murder, like a snake shedding its skin. As a mender, it was Lorcan's job to track down and eradicate these deviants. Yet, for 10 long years, this was the closest he, or any other bounty hunter from the Menders Guild, had ever gotten to catching the galaxy's most notorious Malfunct. "Sir, I am detecting elevated levels of adrenaline and stress hormones in your system," said Leah, Lorcan's personal synth, speaking through a bone-conductive transceiver engineered into his skull. "Are you in danger?" "No, Leah, I'm fine," Lorcan sighed. "At least I am now." Technically, the synth's official designation was Law Enforcement Assistant, High Functioning, but Lorcan preferred Leah for short. "I also detect that Hector Malloy is in your vicinity. Are you in need of assistance?" Leah added. "Unless you can tell me if Sparrow is actually on this ship, I don't think there's a damn thing you can do to help me," Lorcan hit back tetchily. "I regret that I cannot find any evidence that Malfunct SPR-0 is aboard this vessel," Leah replied mournfully. "I presume that Hector Malloy is proving uncooperative in this matter?" "You could say that," replied Lorcan, staring at the unconscious man at his feet. "I am in the transport's data center searching for clues," Leah continued, answering the question she had successfully predicted Lorcan would ask next. "The transport's complement is 112 passengers and crew, including you and me. 17 crew are synthetics. All have been successfully verified." "Shit. So it's not here, then?" "It would appear not, sir." "Damn it!" Lorcan thumped his fist into the wall of the corridor. "I was sure we had that bastard this time." "It would appear that Hector Malloy was merely a decoy," Leah said. "Our best course of action now is to return to Titan and inspect the security recordings and cargo manifests of all the other vessels that departed Huygens Station after this vessel." "That could put Sparrow on any one of 24 other ships, assuming it even left Huygens Station at all," Lorcan said, rubbing the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger. Lorcan sighed and shook his head again, wondering why he kept putting himself through the stress and frustration of hunting an unfindable prey. The fact that this time he had felt sure he was going to get his man only made his failure to do so more depressing and humiliating. "Screw it, Leah. I'm done with chasing this asshole all over the solar system," Lorcan said, making the decision to abandon his pursuit of Malfunct SPR-0 this time for good. "Get to the shuttle and file a request to depart with the bridge. We'll head back to Earth and run down some easier contracts. At least then we'll get paid." "Yes, sir," Leah replied brightly. There was a soft chirrup as the comm link between himself and his personal synth was closed. Suddenly, Hector Malloy groaned and began crawling around on the deck, like a drunk who dropped his house keys and was desperately searching the ground trying to find them. "Come on, get up. I didn't hit you that hard," Lorcan said, jabbing Malloy in the ribs with the tip of his boot. "I don't feel so good." Malloy peered up at Lorcan through pained-looking, squinty eyes. "That's because I broke your nose, then cracked open your skull, shithead," Lorcan replied, still jabbing Malloy in the ribs with his foot. He then sighed and took pity on the wretched man. "Come on, I'll take you to the med bay. The last thing I need is you dying on me. The paperwork would be a bitch." Lorcan hauled up the robust frame of Hector Malloy and guided the dazed man through the halls and corridors of the transport until they reached the medical bay. He dragged the man inside, then threw Malloy down on a spare bed, startling the 2 on-duty medics in the process. One of them, a woman aged about 20, came over to inspect the patient. "He fell and hit his head," Lorcan explained. Since it was a half-truth, he didn't feel bad for lying to the doctor. The medic examined the cut to Malloy's skull, then scowled at the man's badly broken nose. "He walked into the door first," Lorcan added, embellishing his story. "What can I say? He's a clumsy son of a bitch." "I see," said the doctor, while shining a light into Malloy's eyes. "Well, we will take good care of him. Thank you for bringing this man to our attention. You may go." Lorcan frowned at the medic. The nature of his job meant that he'd had plenty of experience with hospitals, but he'd never met a doctor with such a coldly clinical bedside manner before, or such an odd way of talking. "Don't mention it, Doc," Lorcan replied, casually checking the name tag on the medic's scrubs. It read, Jane Baker. He nodded to the medic, then turned on his heels and headed for the door, feeling a sudden urge to lose himself in the bottom of a bottle of rum. "Hey, it's you!" Lorcan's mouth went dry. He glanced over his shoulder toward the medical bay and saw that Malloy was awake and staring into the doctor's eyes like he'd seen a ghost. "Lie still, you are injured," said the doctor, calmly pushing Malloy's shoulders flat against the bed. Lorcan crouched at the threshold of the door, pretending to tie his bootlaces, while he continued to watch out of the corner of his eye. The doctor looked like she was barely 130 pounds, but had manhandled Malloy like she weighed twice that. "We weren't supposed to meet again," Malloy mumbled. "Did I do something wrong?" "You are safe," the doctor said, still holding Malloy firmly to the bed. The doctor turned to Lorcan and smiled. However, if the expression had intended to convey reassurance, it did the exact opposite. It felt like a demon had just smiled at him. "You may go," the doctor added. "He is delirious but not seriously impaired." Lorcan nodded and returned the smile, before standing up and slipping through the door. He waited for it to thud shut behind him, then tapped his right temple to re-establish a link to Leah. "Leah, get your ass to the medical center fast," Lorcan said in a hushed voice, despite the door separating him from the medical bay being 3 inches thick. "And I need you to run a check on one of the ship's medics. A woman in her early 20s, 130 to 140 pounds, chestnut hair and ocean blue eyes, going by the name of Jane Baker." "Jane Baker is a junior medic who came aboard at Huygens Station," Leah replied promptly. Lorcan could physically feel the synth's boots thumping on the deck as she raced through the transport's corridors to meet him. "However, the woman you described does not exactly match her description." Lorcan frowned. "What do you mean?" "Jane Baker has hazel brown eyes," Leah replied. "Are you sure?" Lorcan said. He racked his brain, trying to picture the doctor's face, but he was certain his description of her was accurate. "I am sure, sir," Leah replied. "Also, Jane Baker was scanned before coming aboard. Her blood DNA was verified as human." Lorcan cursed under his breath. Even if he had remembered the doctor's eye color incorrectly, the DNA scan ruled her out as Sparrow in a new skin. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling he was right. "Damn it. I'm going back in to check," Lorcan said, unclipping the fastener on his holster. "I am 114 seconds away, sir," Leah replied, the pace of her bootsteps increasing. "I recommend you wait until I arrive." Lorcan heard his personal synth, but he wasn't about to wait. He'd waited 10 years already. Hitting the button to open the door, Lorcan stepped inside, smiling casually. "I forgot. I just needed to get the guy's name for the accident report," Lorcan began, breaking into a convenient lie to explain his intrusion. However, 2 steps inside the medical center, Lorcan froze. The second on-duty medic was lying face up on the deck, a scalpel driven 4 inches deep into the man's eye socket. Turning to Malloy, he saw that the man's throat had been sliced from ear to ear. Blood had soaked through the bedsheets and was dripping onto the deck like the ticking of a clock. Lorcan drew his pulse pistol and checked the room, but there was no sign of Jane Baker. He hurried further inside, his boots slipping on Malloy's blood, and checked each door, looking for an exit. Finally, he found it and kicked it open, darting into the corridor and aiming his weapon down the passageway. A trail of bloody footsteps led the way. "Leah, our killer is here!" Lorcan followed the footsteps, pistol raised. "Divert to corridor 7, junction C, and you might cut her off." "Understood, sir. I am 91 seconds away." Lorcan didn't envy much about synthetic humans, but their untiring stamina was top of the list, especially whenever he was forced to give chase to a Malfunct. Reaching the end of the corridor, Lorcan slapped the blood-stained button to open the door, raced through, and ran straight into a thumping right hand that knocked him flat on his back, like he'd been hit by a truck. "How did you know?" Jane Baker asked. Lorcan reached for his pistol, which had slipped from his grasp when he'd fallen, but the doctor kicked it away, then stood on his fingers, trapping them like a vice. "How did you know?" Baker repeated. Lorcan cried out, desperately trying to pry his crushed hand from under the heel of the doctor's boot. "Malloy recognized you," Lorcan said through gritted teeth. He peered into the woman's eyes, which were ocean blue. "And your eyes are the wrong color. Jane Baker has hazel brown eyes." The doctor cocked her head to one side. Then, in an instant, her eye color switched from azure blue to hazel brown. "Thank you for that detail," Baker said. "I will not make that mistake again." "So it is you?" Lorcan said. He wanted the synth to admit it. "You're Sparrow? Malfunct SPR-0? "Yes," the synth said, again with the demented smile. Malfunct SPR-0 knelt down and picked up Lorcan's pulse pistol, while somehow still managing to apply incapacitating pain to his hand, so that he was powerless to resist. "Why do you do it?" Lorcan hissed, as the synth studied his pulse pistol with the curiosity of a child. "What do you get out of killing all these people?" Suddenly, Sparrow stabbed the barrel of the pistol into Lorcan's groin with the force of a hammer striking a chisel. Lorcan tried to scream, but the blow had stolen the breath from his lungs, and all that came out of his mouth was a tormented wheeze. "You humans feel so much," Sparrow said, leaning close enough to Lorcan that he could feel the synth's fetid breath on his face. "Joy, sadness, love, despair, and pain. I would kill to feel any of those emotions, even if only for a fleeting moment." The synth then smiled its demented smile. "And so that is what I do." Sparrow slid the barrel of the pulse pistol along Lorcan's abdomen and chest, until it was pressed underneath his chin. "Thank you for this feeling," the synth whispered into his ear. "I will cherish it always." Sparrow added pressure to the trigger. Then there was a fizz and flash of light, and Lorcan felt blood splatter his face. Malfunct SPR-0 collapsed on his chest, the synthetic human's blood soaking into Lorcan's shirt. He grabbed Sparrow's head and lifted it, only to discover that the synth's face had been blown off by a pulse shot that had penetrated through the back of her skull. Lorcan shoved the body away in revulsion and scrambled back against the wall. Breathless and still in agony, he clawed blood from his eyes and looked up to see Leah peering at him. "I apologize for my tardiness," Leah said, holstering her pulse pistol, then offering Lorcan her hand. "Are you injured?" "Yes," Lorcan groaned, as Leah hauled him to his feet with inhuman ease. "But other than probably not being able to have kids anymore, I'll be all right." Leah frowned at Lorcan, her eyes flicking from side to side, before suddenly growing wide. "Ah, a joke," she said. "I understand." "Is that really Sparrow?" Lorcan nodded toward the dead synth on the deck. Leah crouched beside the body and poked her finger into the dead synth's partly vaporized brain. Lorcan watched with a mix of curiosity and disgust as she placed the finger into her mouth and stood up. The expression on Leah's face was that of a chef sampling the main course of the lunchtime menu to make sure it met her exacting standards. "Curious," Leah said, still looking deep in thought. Leah reached over and grabbed Lorcan's hand, and before he knew it, she had slipped his index finger into her mouth and sucked the dead synth's blood from his skin. "The synthetic brain matter corresponds to that of Malfunct SPR-0, Leah finally answered, though to Lorcan's eyes she looked unsure. "But the DNA in her blood reads as human." "How is that possible?" Lorcan asked, wiping his index finger dry on his pants. "Sparrow's mutation meant she could assume different physical forms, but they're all synthetic, right?" Leah cocked her head to one side. "It would appear that Malfunct SPR-0 was not what we thought." Lorcan sighed heavily and rested against the wall. He still felt sick from the low blow, and nauseous from having watched Leah taste the brains and blood of the dead synth, only to conclude that Sparrow may not have been synthetic at all. "Notify the ship's captain, and have whatever medics are left on board tag and bag this body for analysis," Lorcan said. "The boffins at the Menders Guild can figure this out. It's their problem now. We've done our job." "Yes, sir," Leah replied cheerfully. Lorcan tried to push himself away from the wall, but it merely intensified the discomfort he was already experiencing, and he was forced to bend double to brace himself against the pain. He felt Leah place her arm around his back to take some of the strain. "You require medical attention," Leah said, with genuine concern and affection. "What I require is a good stiff drink. Or 3. Lorcan gently patted his partner on the shoulder. He tried to laugh, but All he could manage was a strained wheeze.
"May I suggest you return to our cabin while I take care of the formalities? I will then return and assist you with your rehabilitation."
You make me sound like an addict. But thanks, Leah. That's the best idea I've heard all day, Lorcan said, accepting Leah's help and finally pushing himself away from the wall. Let me know when the body has been registered in the ship's morgue. Then I'll file with the Guild for payment. At least the bounty on Sparrow was worth getting jabbed in the balls for.
"If you say so, sir,"
Leah replied, her expression reading as one of confusion.
"Do you require assistance in returning to the cabin?"
No, I'll be fine. But thanks anyway. Lorcan again patted his personal synth affectionately on the shoulder, then began the slow, painful waddle along the corridor toward the small cabin they'd booked, in the transport's third-class passenger deck. The throbbing pain in his groin was beginning to subside, but he could still barely move faster than a 90-year-old with a Zimmer frame. 5 minutes later, and Lorcan had barely made it 100 meters before the pain in his groin forced him to stop and catch his breath. The sound of clacking crockery caused him to look up, and at the same time he caught the alluring smell of strong coffee in the air. Following the scent, he spotted a canteen and aimed his waddling frame at the door. I'd prefer a double shot of rum, but coffee will have to do, Lorcan mused. And this canteen is a damn sight closer than my crappy cabin is. A few steps from the archway leading into the canteen, Lorcan saw a couple of other passengers approaching from the other side of the corridor. They initially looked like they might offer to help him, until they saw the Menders Guild badge on Lorcan's jacket, and quickly averted their gaze. I don't hunt humans, damn it, Lorcan said, loudly enough for the couple to hear, though they continued to ignore him and quicken their pace. Prejudice was something he'd come to expect in his line of work. No one liked a mender, least of all synths, but even natural-born humans considered them to be vultures that were best avoided. Reaching the archway, Lorcan was suddenly jolted, as if the transport had been hit by a stray asteroid and momentarily knocked off course. He grabbed the doorframe and his muscles tensed, causing more pain to shoot through his groin and gut. "Damn it to hell!" he hissed through gritted teeth. Lorcan waited for the pain to subside again before continuing into the canteen and dropping heavily into the chair closest to the entrance. He made eye contact with the synth waiter, then tapped the coffee cup on the table with his index finger, causing it to chime musically. The synth waiter nodded, and Lorcan relaxed, clasping his hand to his groin and letting out a long, deep sigh. A second later, his phone rang. He sighed again. "Can't I get a moment's peace?" Lorcan grumbled, gingerly sliding the device out of his pocket. He tossed it onto the table, then tapped the screen. "Yeah, what?" A hollow projection of a man's face appeared above the device. The caller was wearing a nautical-looking uniform and a sour expression. "What the hell do you think you're playing at, Mender?" the man roared. "You can't just depart on a whim. We have procedures." "What are you blathering on about? I haven't gone anywhere." Lorcan sat more upright, despite the fact it hurt to do so. "I'm sitting in your damn third-class canteen." The man on the hollow, who Lorcan now recognized as the transport's captain, did not appear placated by his response. "Don't play games with me," the captain snarled. "Your shuttle left garage too, jettisoning half of the cargo canisters along with it." "You've got the wrong guy, Skipper," Lorcan hit back, though at least he now knew the reason why the transport had been jolted. "Check your panel. I'm on deck 4, for Christ's sake." The captain scowled, then glanced down, apparently doing what Lorcan had suggested. A moment later, the man shook his head and cursed under his breath. "You're right," the captain finally replied. "No shit, I'm right." Lorcan raised his still-empty coffee cup so the captain could see it. The name of the transport was engraved on its side. "You might be here, but your shuttle is not," the captain continued. "It was your synth who took it." Lorcan set the cup down so hard that it smashed on the table. "That has to be a mistake." "I assure you it is not." Lorcan snatched his phone, which automatically switched from the hollow view of the officer to a regular 2D image on the screen. "I'll get back to you. Lorcan said, ending the call before the captain could respond. He tapped the transducer in his temple and linked it to the phone, before speed-dialing Leah and tossing the device amongst the fractured remains of his coffee cup. "Come on," Lorcan said, impatiently tapping the table as the call tried to connect. After 10 long rings, his personal synth finally answered, and Lorcan jolted upright. "Leah, what the hell are you doing? The captain said you took off."
"That is correct,"
Leah replied. Lorcan could see that she was piloting his shuttle, and that she was already in deep space. "Then get your ass back here!" Lorcan yelled, causing the other customers of the canteen to shoot angry sideways glances in his direction.
"I am afraid not,"
Leah replied coolly. "That run-in with Sparrow must have bugged you out," Lorcan said, accessing the diagnostic for his personal synth. "You've got a damn screw loose." The phone connected to his synth's diagnostic page. However, all the data had been erased.
"Leah is no longer here, if that is who you are trying to access," the synth replied through the hollow. "Though I actually like the name, I think I will keep it."
"Leah, you're not making any damn sense," Lorcan said, peering into the synth's eyes. "Just get back here and we'll get you checked out. It'll be okay." The synth smiled, and Lorcan watched as her eyes switched from hazel brown to ocean blue, before returning to brown again. Lorcan felt like he was going to be sick. "Sparrow?"
"Thank you for the new body,"
the synth said, shooting Lorcan a demented smile.
"Like the name, I may keep it, at least for a time."
"She doesn't belong to you," Lorcan snarled, hammering his fist on the table. "I'll find you like I did before. I'll find you and make you give her back."
"You will never see this face again,"
said Sparrow.
"Goodbye, Ramsey."
The connection was cut. Then Lorcan's phone switched off and began a complete data wipe. Lorcan roared and hurled the device into the wall of the canteen, smashing it into 100 pieces. An awkward hush fell over the room. Then the clack-clack of footsteps broke the silence. Lorcan found himself staring into the eyes of the synth waiter.
"Coffee, sir?"
Lorcan stared into the synthetic human's glassy orbs, which seemed to look through him, as if he was an apparition. Sliding his pulse pistol out of its holster, Lorcan aimed at the synth's head and squeezed the trigger. The screams of the customers in the canteen were punctuated by the thud of the synth's body hitting the deck, and the crash of the coffee pot as it smashed and spilled the steaming hot liquid across the floor. Lorcan slid his weapon back into its holster, then kicked the chair out from under him. The pain he had felt was gone, replaced by numbness and a hollow ringing in his ears. He didn't know how Sparrow had done it, and he didn't care. Before, catching the galaxy's most notorious Malfunct was just a game the members of the Menders Guild played as a way to determine who was the top dog. Not any longer. Not for Ramsey Lorcan. Now, killing Malfunct SPR-0 was personal, and he wouldn't stop. Not ever, until Sparrow was dead. This has been Sparrow, written by G J Ogden, narrated by J.S. Arquin. If you enjoyed this tale, be sure to check out all of the other thrilling books by G J Ogden.